Hey guys, what is going on? It's your boy Luke here for our Thursday night football live stream. It's a little bit special this time around for me because it's the Steelers going up the Vikings. Obvious Steeler fan myself here. So I'm going to go ahead and separate the fandom right now. All of these picks are going to be per the numbers. Not what I think is going to happen, what the numbers say are going to happen. So I'm able to go ahead and put that aside. And because we're in a dome today, we don't need to touch on the weather. We can hop right into the player pool. So you can see that we've updated these projections for Dalvin Cook, expected to be active. We've gone a smoke screen all over the place today, whether it's Tom Pelissero this morning saying that he's closer to active than he is questionable. And then the Vikings immediately, within an hour going out and saying that no, he's in fact a game time decision and nothing has changed. It's really hard to believe either side here. I'm going to go ahead and expect that Tom's report was relatively accurate there, that he was closer to active than he is questionable. And as a result, that does change the slate quite a bit. It takes somebody like Alexander Mattison, who's a good $1,000 cheaper, who's a very solid value, completely off of the board, and forces us into some different type of builds. So we'll go ahead and touch on some of those changes. Another change that I made to my projections here is, if you guys saw my preview earlier on in the week, you know that I expect this to be a little bit higher scoring than what Vegas thinks. It actually went up to a 44.5 point total. I have it at a 49 point total. So the numbers you guys see with the projected points, target shares, all of that sort of fun stuff is reflected for a game that's a 49 point total, not 44.5. So some of these projections here might be a little bit higher than what you see around the industry. That is the reason for that. I also got clarification that Adam Thielen is out. He was a game time decision when we last spoke here, so not really surprising that he's going to be out for this affair. It does have a huge effect on the Vikings team, though. They were already a concentrated offense, so that's about a 30% target share that needs distributed. I do expect Justin Jefferson to eat up a good amount of that, perhaps even 10-15% of that, but the 20 to 25% that's left over are going to be distributed between guys like KJ Osborne, Dede Westbrook. Dede Westbrook's going to see a massive uptick in usage, perhaps even a little bit to somebody like a Tyler Conklin, but also to some of these running backs. We're going to see a few more checkdowns, a few more setup screens, that type of thing, to whether Dalvin Cook or Alexander Mattison, whoever takes the field for them. Let's go ahead and start at the top of the board, though. Go position by position. That was the holistic view of the game. I still like both quarterbacks, actually, in fact, a little bit more than earlier on in the week. You can see my projections for both of them have slightly increased. Still really like both of them at the captain slot. Still really like them at the flex position, obviously. One caveat I would add to, if you're using them in the captain slot, is make sure that you're using them in the right type of correlated lineups. If you're using Kirk Cousins at a captain, make sure you're pairing him up with a ton of his pass receivers, vice versa for Ben Roethlisberger. If you're using somebody like Kirk Cousins at captain, and then 4 players on the Steelers, for example, that is not the way to be making your lineup. You want to make sure that is a Vikings onslaught if you're going to Kirk Cousins at captain. If I was going to select between the two here, I would definitely side towards Kirk Cousins. I mean, they're the side that's favored in this game. I have them projected for slightly more points. They're also the team that throws the ball more. To this point of the year, the Steelers have been a little bit more run heavy, particularly towards the latter half of the year. Let's move down to running back. I mean, Dalvin Cook obviously throws a wrench into all of your projections. For me, and these ownership numbers, essentially, you're looking at right around 50-60% ownership for somebody like Dalvin. At the captain slot, probably right around 21-22%. Obviously, the numbers have not reflected that change as of right now. It's a little bit too early to be able to make those assumptions. That news that came out this morning. But either way, we got to make sure that more lineups are generated across the industry, that kind of thing. Then we can get a better idea of what those will look like. But I'm expecting it to be in the mid-50s for his flex ownership, right around 22-23% for his captain ownership. That's where I expect that to come in. But either way, Dalvin Cook, somebody who's going to project well on a points per dollar basis, you can see at 17.1 points. I actually have Najee Harris slightly projected higher at 17.2. I don't think you can go wrong with either option. I think that they're a decent option in the captain slot, whether or at the flex position. Same thing with the quarterbacks, though. Because you're playing a running back at captain, you probably want to correlate that to the rest of your team. Running backs, just like a quarterback, tend to be correlated to the team's success, particularly the running back position, because you're getting more carries when you're ahead, trying to run out the clock, end the game quicker, that kind of thing. So I do like going to both of these teams. Just make sure you're correlating them the right way. The one exception to that rule was Javonte Williams a few weeks ago. If you guys remember that, he ended up going for like 40-something fantasy points, that kind of thing. That's rare, though. So I wanted to go ahead and identify that because it does happen from time to time. It's just extremely outlier performances when that happens. As for the backup running backs, if Dalvin Cook is starting and getting 80-90% of the snaps, like Tom Pelissero was saying this morning, apparently he's going to be back to full capacity. I'm not going to want to be on Alexander Mattison because he would project for 0.7x value. Not really what you're looking for here. Kenny Ngabu, he was only a play if Cook was out, and he wasn't a very strong play to begin with. Now becomes almost useless on the slate. Benny Snell was useless to begin with. CJ Hamm is going to get at the most a goal line touch and a 1-yard touchdown. So if 6.1 points, if you think that gets you by tonight, go ahead and take him. But he's far from guaranteed to even get that touch. And Anthony McFarland Jr. has been a complete no-show for the Steelers this year. You're going to want to avoid him. Let's move on to wide receiver. So you guys can see there's not much value at running back, which is slightly concerning. I mean, we typically at least have somebody that we can get 8 to 9 points at running back, that kind of thing. We're going to have to do that at wide receiver this week. There's no doubt about it. Dede Westbrook, I don't want to jump too far ahead. He's by far the best value play on the slate. I'm going to be looking at an insane amount of ownership on him. So Justin Jefferson, though, is my favorite play on the slate. So he's somebody who has an extremely high ceiling here, particularly with Joe Hayden sidelined. This team's different in the secondary when Hayden is out. We've been torched by lesser wide receivers, let alone somebody like Justin Jefferson, who's not only already a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, arguably a top 3 talent at the wide receiver position. He's now getting extra usage with Adam Thielen out. He's also dealing with a banged up secondary. I mean, you cannot create a situation for Justin Jefferson. In fact, this is probably the perfect situation for a wide receiver. Definitely going to find some ownership. You can see I have him at 44% right here. Because Alexander Mattison is out, he may actually get a little bit more ownership because people expect them to pass a little bit more. I have him at 18.1% at the captain position. I think both of those are too low. I have him locked into my lineups, whether it's at flex or at captain. He is my highest owned captain on the slate as well. Going down to Deontay Johnson, as a Steeler fan, I've gotten to see his play over these last 2 years, and he has gotten slightly better and better as the weeks have gone on. He's getting better with his route running. He's not dropping as nearly as many balls as what we saw last year. I think he's appropriately priced here. It's over $10,000, which is definitely, ouch. That's expensive. He's more expensive than Najee Harris, but I definitely could see him paying off on this slate, particularly if the Steelers end up winning this thing. So he is in my player pool. He is at captain. He just isn't my favorite play on the slate. Adam Thielen is out, so we know that. That is reflected there. Let's go down to Chase Claypool. So Chase Claypool is a great play here. He's somebody who's a home run play threat. And again, I expect this to be a high scoring game. So you can see I have him projected for 14.7 points, which is really solid value at his price tag. What's more solid, though, is KJ Osborne. So the fact that we have Thielen out of the lineup really gives a massive boost of usage to KJ Osborne. Also, a huge uptick in his snap percentage. This team loves to run 2 tight ends, particularly Conklin out there, and one of their other run blocking tight ends, and obviously pound the rock with Dalvin Cook. They can't really do that anymore because Thielen was one of the better run blockers in the entire NFL at the wide receiver position. KJ Osborne is probably the opposite of that. Relatively young wide receiver, doesn't have a huge frame. They're going to use a lot of Dede Westbrook as a better run blocker, I would expect. He's also a better route runner. So again, I keep getting ahead of myself with Dede Westbrook, but he's one of my favorite plays in the slate. Osborne, I still like him, though. He's going to play about 80% of snaps tonight. He's a deep play waiting to happen. I usually like targeting him when he's low owned, even in like large field GPPs for the main slate. But for Showdown, he does have that kind of upside you're looking for. So he will be in my player pool. I'm not at the captain position, though. I just think that's a little bit too risky. I'm not sure whether he has 2 touchdown upside. And I do think that somebody in this field is going to go out and get two touchdowns. I think a quarterback has 4 or 5 touchdown upside in them as well. So that's why I have them at captain. I'm not sure if KJ Osborne has that 25-point ceiling in him. Let's go down to some of these cheap guys. We'll go to Dede. I can't wait anymore. This guy is the highest projected play in points per dollar on the slate of anybody that's relevant. I mean, Anthony Miller down here at $200, a 2-point projection. It's not really relevant on the slate. You're not going to need those 2 points. Dede Westbrook up here, this is somebody who, again, is going to play 70, maybe even 80% of snaps. They're going to run quite a few 3 wide receiver sets today because they don't have all of their players in there. A lot more plays are drawn up for these 3 wide receiver sets, particularly for some of the second units on the NFL. The second units are just more used to running those plays. A lot of those trick packages, a lot of the specialty packages, particularly in the running game, where you're using 2 tight ends, maybe an extra lineman, that kind of thing, backups aren't used to running those plays. So Dede Westbrook, KJ Osborne, they're not really going to go to those packages if they're not used to running them. So keep that in mind. They've only had 4 days since their last game, so they don't have much practice time. They didn't practice on Monday, so they only had 2 practices to get that all figured out. So I expect them to run some 3 wide receiver sets. So all 3 of them are going to get plenty of snaps. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, you're looking at like 99% snap share. The other 2 are around 75%, I'd say. Let's go down through Ray McCloud, though. He's $3,200. I have him projected as a decent points per dollar play. He's been getting plenty of snaps with Juju Smith-Schuster out for the year. James Washington, for some reason, is priced higher than him, even though he's seen much less snaps, much less usage. Raymond McCloud is definitely the one that you would want to go to out of those 2. Let's move on to tight end, because anytime we're on a showdown slate, you have to take a look at the tight ends. Seemingly one scores out of obscurity every single week. And I'm not really sure who that's going to be this week. The only real candidate I have for that is Chris Herndon. He's $200. He does play in some of those 2 tight end sets for the Vikings, particularly when they get down in the red zone, which shows that he has opportunity to score a touchdown, just hasn't really done it to this point of the year. I believe has 1 touchdown on the year. This is somebody who, for the Jets, was a lot more effective. And that's saying something if you can be more effective for a Jets team. So I definitely think he at least has the talent level. He just has not shown that to this point. So that has not changed. At $200, he is an option at the bottom of the board in play, because if he scores a touchdown, you're looking at 7 to 8 points. As opposed to Anthony Miller, I think his true upside is to catch like 1 or 2 5-yard passes. So that's the spiel there on the $200 guys. In terms of the more expensive options at tight end, Pat Freiermuth has been a revelation for the Steelers team. I was not sold on him at the beginning of the year, particularly after his first 2 or 3 games. I thought he looked slow, sluggish. A future Heath Miller, which isn't really a diss. I mean, obviously had a very solid career for the Steelers, but he also wasn't anything special. And I'm a Steeler fan saying that. My family would slap me silly for saying that, but it's the truth. He was just an all right tight end, had a long career, put up some good production, great blocker. Pat Freiermuth is more than that. Pat Freiermuth has legit ball skills. The guy, he has that Jason Witten ability to just find holes in defenses. So he's an interesting prospect. I definitely like him here in this contest, even at the captain slot. I do like Tyler Conklin. Doesn't really have the same upside as somebody like a Pat Freiermuth. He's in that same price tier, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think he should be closer to $4,800. But he's a tight end on a showdown slate, and I would be beside myself to not have him in my player pool. Let's move on to the defenses and kickers. The defenses are getting less and less attractive as I expect this total to get higher, higher, and higher. Again, I have it at a 49-point over-under, rather than what Vegas has it at a 44.5-point over-under, which makes them slightly less usable. They're also getting a little bit of ownership as well. They're in the mid-teens, which makes them less attractive too. They're in my player pool, and I'm looking at around 8 to 10% ownership on each option. At kicker, you can go to either option too. I'm not thrilled about using kickers on Showdown. You're never going to hear me talk about them as a core play, but they're also people I'm not avoiding because time and time again, right around 34% of the time in Showdown slates is what we've seen over the last few years. They end up in the optimal lineup. So it's usually the winning team where you get that type of a spike performance, which obviously makes sense. Their performance is directly correlated to a team's over-under score. So with a higher total game, the kickers get a little bit of a boost. And of course, the defenses get a slight decrease. So that's why I like going to 2 options there. If I was going to pick one, it would be Greg Joseph, just because he's on the winning side there. And again, should have the higher implied total. But that's all we've got here for the Showdown slate, guys. I'm going to hop over to the NBA side of things, have some jock market bids to put in, some DFS lineups to go ahead and finish putting together. But if you're watching this on replay, feel free to go ahead and put any of your questions down in the chat. I'll get to them as soon as I see them, and go Steelers tonight.